Oh, hello. Welcome to the 2013 Hundie Challenge. Today we're going to be discussing The Royal Tenenbaums by Spuds MacKenzie. Dee doo dee doo doo dee doo 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 dee doo dee doo doo dee doo dee doo doo dee doo 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 dee doo dee doo doo. I didn't remember it, but I've heard of this book. I don't think I've read it before, but I've heard of it or I've read something about it somewhere before. It really rang a bell in my mind for some reason. This is a story, what passes for irony in olden times, I guess. It's basically, there's this family called the Ambersons, and they're like an old-timey, I can't even think of the word right now. They're old money. I guess that's what you say, old money. And they're really important in this town. I don't think the town's ever mentioned, in the Midwest somewhere. And they kind of believe in horses and carriages, and they kind of make fun of the coming of the car, the automobile, the horseless carriage, it's called in the beginning. And it's one of these kind of stories that we're more familiar, I think, with like a rags to riches story, like Scarface, or that's more of the common kind of thing we see, where somebody starts out poor and they build their way up. Already in this challenge, I've read a couple of stories that are more like riches to rags, like some old-timey family comes on hard times and finally disintegrates, or like Sister Carrie, there was the really rich. Whatever he was, some kind of host at a restaurant or something, and he ended up choking himself in a like a YMCA. So back to the Magnificent Ambersons, though. They're kind of like the most important family in town, and this shows kind of their disintegration and their destruction. Partly as due to the industrial age, but because there is a nouveau riche family that kind of takes over for them, the Morgans, but also partly because they're so, fucking full of themselves and unwilling to change. So the big finale, the big ending is that the main character, Georgie Amberson, is hit by a car. And I've heard this somewhere. I've either read the description somewhere or whatever, but it's all about the coming of the car. That is that's the text. Obviously, the subtext is about having to change with the times and accept that things are not always going to be as they are. It's kind of funny. There's actually some conversations that Georgie. I'm sorry, I think I called him Georgie Amberson. He's not actually an Amberson. He's only an Amberson by blood. His name is Minifer. He's kind of like, Napoleon or Hitler. Like, they weren't really French or German, so they were more like eager to act like they were. So Georgie actually has several conversations where he says, oh, this automobile is a passing fad, and, good upright people are going to want to hang on to their horses and buggies. And this was striking, especially today, because we always hear shit like this. People were talking about how the internet was going to be just a fad, and they're talking about how ebooks are going to be a fad, and people will always prefer the real book, and getting your news online was going to be a fad because the real dignified people will always want to get their news out of a newspaper. And, there's always these societal changes that people kind of fight just because, whether they have a vested interest in it or not. Now, the Ambersons did have a vested interest in keeping the town pre-industrial. The thing is, while the industrial versus the kind of 19th century ethos was a big part of this book, the other big part of it was that Georgie Minifer of the Amberson clan was just such a total douchebag. the whole time. There's just no other way to describe him. He starts off as, I think they even described him as like a little Lord Fauntleroy, kind of prancing around and, being rude to his elders. And I mean, like, we're all rude to our elders now and then, but this guy was like cursing out a Protestant minister, and he's beating up kids and beating up older kids, and then saying, "Oh well, my grandfather's got all the money, so what are you going to do?" And then kids will be scared of him, just like a royal pretentious jackass. And you want him to get his comeuppance. In fact, I think it's mentioned a couple times in the book. Yeah, everybody wanted him to get his comeuppance. And his comeuppance finally comes when he's just forgotten and nobody knows who he is. And he actually has to go and work for a living because they finally used up his family fortune because the industrial city had no place for him. So he gets his comeuppance. But in a way, you also want him to reform. You want him to stop being such a jackass. And he has the opportunity to. He falls in love with this almost kind of perfect woman, Lucy, who's the only woman who ever challenges him, who ever calls him on his bullshit. And of course, if you've ever read a book or seen a movie or anything before, when somebody calls you on your bullshit, that's the person that you're going to fall in love with. So he does, obviously. The problem is her father is a car manufacturer. Also is in love with Georgie's mother. And when she becomes widowed, they finally almost have the opportunity to marry into that, which would have made Lucy and Georgie step-siblings, but, not, as adults and not related by blood. They could have still had a happily ever after. Because of his hubris, Georgie not only destroys his own life, destroys his family name, destroys his mother's happiness, kills his mother because she's sort of heartbroken from not being able to marry, the man she wants, just kind of gives up on life. And all of that, he could have double married into the automobile family and set himself up and his, theoretical future family up for the future. So because of his obstinance, because of his, I keep saying hubris, but, his arrogance, his egotism, he just kind of screws himself. So, it's a good story. It's a short story. It's a novel, but it's relatively short. I feel like I've heard of it. I've heard something about it before because I knew I had heard, they couldn't handle the coming of the automobile, and then at the end he was literally struck by an automobile to drive the point home, that you can't fight the future. Anyway, not a bad little book. I would also like to point out, if anyone from the Modern Library is watching these videos, this book was the second in a trilogy that only took up one slot on the list, and the whole trilogy didn't have to fucking be in there. Whereas, Studs Lonigan and fucking USA that I also have to read, and the goddamn Sound of Music, or what is it, the Sound of Time and Fury or whatever, which is 24 books, all take up one slot. Magnificent Ambersons was just one book, one slot. Maybe you should stick to that next time you're making one of these lists. But anyway, for the rest of you, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.